When I think of living well, it's so hard to put it in. I don't know. It's hard to put it in a sentence. It's hard to, have it or confine it to a specific word. But a few words come up for me when I think of living well, and those words would be contribution, evolution. What else? Sustainability and agency.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today, our guest is Jourdan Johnson. Very excited to talk to this young man here today. Jourdan is our youngest guest. He's in his latter 20s. He's a former college athlete. He's written a book about it, his experience, and looking forward to seeing what Jourdan has to say. It's exciting, to have someone in their 20s share their perspective. And most of the guests have been 50 and older, and some in their 90s or close to 90s, and that's been they were quite interesting conversations and important conversations to have with the elders. And at some point, in one of my guests, they suggested, you should have some younger folks on here to hear what they have to say. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. I was hesitant at first because I was like, oh, they haven't lived long enough. They hadn't made enough mistakes. A little more idealistic, but that's also an important perspective to take into consideration when we are exploring the potential, the possibilities for that which is potentially good. So have at it, Jourdan. Can you just introduce yourself and let everyone know? Well, welcome first
Thank you.
and
Thank you.
foremost. Uh, and can you share with the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, man. First and foremost, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's dope to be the first, the youngest person on the podcast, man. So thank you for inviting me to your platform. And with that being said, man, my name is Jourdan Johnson, former collegiate athlete, author of a book titled The Sports Tunnel: Every Athlete Dies Twice, which is basically a roadmap to identity, a roadmap of discovering a new narrative outside of the scoreboard. And man, I'm a young facilitator. I say I facilitate when it comes to identity, a caregiver of narrative as it pertains to young adults and student athletes.
Nice. Well, I'm thinking that a lot of that background has influenced and shaped your perspective on what living well means. I would like to hear a little bit more about your experiences as an athlete um, and and the work that you're doing. I just suspect that naturally that will come out. This is not a interview about your book, but I'm assuming that organically will come out in the conversation. So here in the beginning, I asked the question: what does living well mean to you? What is a good life? Uh, what makes life worth living? I asked those three questions because they offer a slightly different angle at the broader subject of the good life or living well. So what comes up for you when you hear those questions?
Man, when I think of living well, it's so hard to put it in. I don't know. It's hard to put it in a sentence. It's hard to, have it or confine it to a specific word. But a few words come up for me when I think of living well, and those words would be contribution, evolution. What else? Sustainability and agency.
Hmm.
So when I think of contribution, I'm thinking of, what are you giving to the world? What are you giving to the people around you? The people that you can see and can't see, the people that you can touch and can't touch. When I think of agency, I'm thinking of, curating your own narrative and having the ability to be at your own will in the world, if that makes sense. And when I think of sustainability, I think of being able to sustain what living will means to you,
Mm-hmm.
and not confined to what the world has put on you. And then when I think of evolution, it's just, being a student of life, evolving with the world. In a good book, it says you want to be of God, not of the world. So I'm not speaking of being of the world, but God's creation grows and it evolves, and how do you navigate that space is what I think about when I think of evolution.
Hmm. Beautiful, man. I love it. We're gonna unpack those and dig a little deeper and explore with those. Now, this podcast, I don't have no written down questions that I'm going to ask you. It's all spontaneous. It's how I feel in the day.
Right, right.
I didn't sleep a whole lot last night, so let's see what happens.
It's all good.
So contribution, I like that because I think that starting with contribution suggests that there's an interest in not only yourself but others, and being responsible for other human beings. I see as an important piece of the equation for you. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Can you say a little bit more about, because you said something about you know thinking about um, the impact that you have not only for yourself but but the impact you have on folks you know, but also folks you may not know. So can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think contribution. It's like two roles to it. There's a contribution aspect of what we know we're contributing to the world, but there's also an aspect of what you don't know you're contributing to the world. So when I think of contribution, a lot of people may say like, well, what is your purpose in life? But for me personally, in my latter 20s, I have a feeling of what that is, but I'm not too certain of what that is. So when I think of contributing to the world, I'm more so navigating in realms where I find fulfillment. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes for me, fulfillment is like, I think of joy and giving. So like, what can you give, and how does joy correlate with that vehicle of giving?
Mm-hmm.
So that, when I think of contribution, I'm just thinking of like, what can you give? What are the gifts that you have innately, and what are the skill sets that you can develop within yourself to give? Because I think that's what we're created for, to give and add value to spaces, to people, and to everything around us.
Mm-hmm. So there's a sense of joy in service. There's
Right,
this in serving others. There is not only this, that we're giving, but finding a sense of joy out of the process of uh, giving or serving others. Yeah, I think that's powerful because oftentimes, especially when I was younger, I'm sure you may have heard this too. Oftentimes, we're told that you go live the good life, and a lot of us in our culture, a lot of it is all about bling bling, and it's about me, me, me. What can I do for me? What can I do for my happiness, my joy? What can I acquire?
right.
How can I enhance my social status, my reputation in the world? I'd love to hear that a young person is interested in not only themselves but contributing to the world through their work, through their actions. That's really really good to hear.
Right, right. I think it's man, it's something that like you could feel when you're in it, and sometimes it's hard to explain.
Mm-hmm.
Like I work with a lot of young people. Some of them maybe only a few years younger than me, but when I get opportunities to contribute, whether it be athletes, whether it be young adults, there's this joy that I get because it reminds me of how much abundance I have.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes we step into this space of like, we want more, and we lose scope of what we have.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in those spaces of contributing impact and living in fulfillment, you remind yourself of like, man, I have something to give.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I love that. Yeah, you have abundance, in the fact that we have the capacity to offer something means that we have an abundance in our life, and to acknowledge that abundance in service.
Right.
I guess that's one way to realize that abundance actually is through our giving.
Right.
The fact that we can give suggests that we have something in excess to
Hmm.
give. And yeah, that kind of brings it out. I mean, you mentioned something about purpose, and yeah, when you're young, you feel like, do I really know what my purpose is? But purposes change, they evolve, and it sounds like you're fulfilling a purpose. Is it the purpose? What is the purpose anyway? Does it get more? Does it get more refined? Do you have a much more um, granular way of talking about it? Sure. As you get older, you've had more life experience. You're going to be able to articulate that purpose with language in a much more effective way because you've lived a little bit more.
Right.
Nonetheless, I think you're speaking of purpose when you're giving, you're serving, you're contributing, and there's a sense of joy that is associated with it. There's something that feels good about it that's indescribable. To me, that sounds like a purpose, some type of something has happened purposefully. I can't say
Right.
that right. There's something that's happening there that I think is purposeful. Wow, I can't say that today.
Yeah, so
I told you I didn't sleep well, man. Let's see what happens. But yeah, I mean that sounds great, man. You also said something associated with this contribution that I want to draw out a little bit more. When you said that when I contribute, I need to take into consideration not only the impact that I'm having on those in front of me, but those who I am not seeing. Can you say a little bit more about that? I have my ideas, but I would love to hear what you have to say about that.
yeah, man. Like there's a way that we perceive ourselves, and then there's a way that other people perceive us. It may be in alignment, but it may not be. And I think it's important to understand that because you know the term where you say get out of your own way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we stand in our own way because it's a us thing. But when you remove yourself and you're able to and you're able to show up, you realize that other people need you to show up. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not just you; it's other people too. So you know, I do content or whatever the case may be. You know, I post it on social media, and it always intrigues me how other people communicate how they view the things that I put out. You know, so back to just contribution, like man, like how you show up affects like you, it affects the people in front of you, but it also affects the people that you may not know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so important for you to just show up and do the thing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and I mean it's quite easy to see that with modern technology, with social media. You make a post, people who don't know you will come into contact with that post. So being mindful of what it is that you're posting,
Right.
but also showing up like as you're saying, being in alignment with yourself. That's another word that's associated with purpose, I think. Um, Being in alignment with what is inside of you that's drawing you, that's compelling you to contribute, that's compelling you to give. And this idea, you're right, this idea of getting out of our way. Who is it that's getting out the way? And I think about it that the smaller self, the quote, what we generally say ego, that's a little bit much more complex way of looking at that. But for simplicity's sake, we'll just say ego. This sense of identity, the sense of Broderick. Can Broderick get out the way and allow that which transcends Broderick and Broderick's experience to come forward in every action that Broderick engages in, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
And so, like, let's just use these terms. I read too much philosophy, so I try to be too careful. with my language. But we'll just, for the sake of simplicity, we'll use the word soul. How do I allow my soul to come through? Now, the soul is not as restricted as the personality or the identity, the ego. How do I let that come forward? How do I let my ego get out the way, my identity get out the way, and to allow something greater to uh, come forth in how I show up in the world? I think that's powerful. I think that allows me to give more to the world beyond what my identity will allow me to give, if that makes sense. What does that? How does that sound to you? I'll just leave it at that.
Hmm. We talked previously, and when you're communicating this, the thing that I speak about is, or think of, is curiosity. Like, there's a certain level of curiosity that a person has to even explore those depths within.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say, evolution. Evolution is one of those words about living well, because you have to understand that as you grow, you're gonna identify new parts of yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to be willing to find, to embrace those parts of yourself. So when you're speaking, on identity and bringing soul to the forefront, it's super complex, but yeah, it takes a different type of mindset to even think about that complexity, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, this idea of, so that's great. You brought in evolution, because I was going to ask you that as well. I'll ask you before I say much more. I'm slow on words anyway this morning, so I'll just ask you. What does evolution mean to you? I'm not. You don't have to be some textbook definition. I'm just
Yeah,
in your own language. What does evolution mean to you? Definitely doesn't have to be a biological definition. So.
yeah, I think evolution is progressiveness, the
Mm-hmm.
ability to adapt as things change.
Mm-hmm.
That's simply put.
Yeah, that's why I look at it too. It's a simple way of looking at evolution, and there has
Right.
to be some type of adaptive component, and that which is adapting to the situations that it finds itself um, in order for it to adapt. I'm just going to probe you a little bit here. So, in order for it to adapt, what does it have to do? What does a person have to do to adapt? Yeah.
First, I would say first you have to be willing, but in order to be willing, you have to pinpoint, and with that comes awareness. So I'll say the first thing is being aware
Mm-hmm.
that things are changing or that things will eventually change.
Mm-hmm.
And once that awareness kicks in, then you have to tap into, okay, am I willing? And then
Mm-hmm.
what is willing? Am I willing to adapt, change? Because
There it
they
is.
say the one thing that most humans hate is change.
That's right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I could be aware of it. I could I could see it coming, but am I willing to change?
Mm-hmm. I think having a sensitivity to what is right in front of us, the challenges that we're facing. Life is is a abundance of challenge, and how am I going to adapt to the challenges that are in front of me? Now, there are ways to adapt. There's a positive and a negative way of adapting. And some people may call that negative way of adapting as devolution, or your and that positive way of adapting is an evolution in terms of the conscious human experience. Now, in biology, the creature that doesn't adapt is going to die away. But and when we're thinking about our own sense of self and how we navigate the world, because I've been thinking about it. It's so funny that this came up, because I've been thinking about this recently. Um, is that you can adapt to a situation, and that adaptive quality that you take can be regressive. So you de-evolve. I know that may not be a word, but I'm just want to emphasize that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Say, for instance, life is really hard. I've seen this. You've probably seen this too. And especially in certain older folks, um, it's so hard they can't really deal with it. And so, what do they typically do? Booze. They think booze is going to solve the problem. Or they know it's not going to solve the problem. They just know it's a way of escaping. And so, if you're constantly trying to escape away from your challenges, that's an adaptive thing that you're doing. But what ends up happening, you never really overcome the situation that you find yourself in. What you end up becoming is, not always, of course, but a lot of people become alcoholics, for instance. Um, they become severely depressed, all types of mental health disorders or dysfunctions as a result of not doing the part that you suggest, not being willing to transcend, to overcome the challenge. To try to transcend or overcome the challenges and engage in your agency. Having the aspiration to face the challenges with awareness and transcend them. That's a process of evolution.
Hmm.
Because you can adapt to a situation, and we see it. I know I see it in my community and my family. I see it in my own father, who's never quite adapted positively to the situations that he found himself in, and so he's regressed significantly, especially when when you're in your 70s. It really shows itself. It really reveals itself.
Hmm.
And that's not about a person, and that's a whole nother discussion of the ethics or the morality of a person. We're not even talking about that. Just a simple process of contending with the challenges that we face, and then we have a choice. Because suddenly, in what you're saying is, we have a choice. We can engage our will, we can engage our agency to overcome the challenges that we're facing. And that is an evolutionary process.
Hmm.
That is a positive adaptive process versus a negative adaptive process. Um, I'll be quiet and see. What do you have to
That's
say? Do you have anything to say about that? Because there's
yeah,
definitely
yeah,
more to be
that's
said.
good. That's good. Because I know first we said, or I said, a lot of times we got to get out of our own way. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're speaking, you say challenges, you say we find ourselves in these situations. And I would like to just for fun, I would like to replace situations with self. I would like to replace challenges with self because one thing I've realized just from my personal experience is a lot of the challenges and a lot of the situations that we come across are reflections of ourself.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say we turn to alcohol, some may turn to drugs, so whatever the vice or whatever the thing is, we're not escaping the situation or the challenge. We're escaping ourselves,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
which contributes to us getting into these cycles that repeat themselves. So that's like what comes to mind. Like, man, okay, he's saying situations, he's saying challenges, but man, let's replace it with self because that's just how I'm envisioning, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
currently experiencing that. The challenges that I'm facing are just a reflection of me. So that's why I think evolution is important because I understand that when I bump up against this challenge, I realize that okay, I have to evolve in this area or I have to evolve in this area. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm. So the self has to evolve. Oh yeah. Yeah. See, the self has to evolve. Yes, you're right. The challenges that we're facing are a reflection of how, I guess, how we deal with those situations or how we relate to those challenges is a reflection of our sense of self and
right,
how we describe ourselves, how we see ourselves, the narrative that we have about ourselves. Because the self is essentially a narrative. Because you mentioned something about narrative earlier. So essentially, what we're saying is, or what you're suggesting, I think, and this is how I'm interpreting it, is that the self, the narrative that we have about ourselves, has to adapt to the situations that we find ourselves in. And if we positively adapt to those situations, we evolve. So
Mm.
over a lifetime, you're right. Over a lifetime, if we want to maximize our capacity to live well, even if we want to contribute more, we have to be willing to let go of ourselves. We are getting out of our way
Right.
to create a new self, constantly shifting our sense of self, enhancing our sense of self, increasing the complexity of our sense of self to contend with the complexity of the world. And as you get older, you will see that if you're fixated on one narrative of yourself, that one narrative of yourself will impede your progress, will impede your capacity to contend with the subsequent situations or challenges or experiences that you're going to have in your life.
Right.
This process of evolving is directly related to the things that you talked about in terms of what makes life good. You talked about agency. You talked about, awareness.
Hmm.
Uh, of course, you talked about contributing, but you talked about this process of evolving. All of those are intertwined,
Right.
and all of those, at the center of those, I think, is this sense of agency, the being willing to evolve. You're not, it's very difficult to evolve if you don't have any agency involved in it. And taking advantage of the choices before you. How do you know you have a choice? You have to be aware. You have to have the sensitivity. It's that awareness piece that's important. If we're
Mm.
walking around in the world blind, just doing what someone else told us to do, or seeing what someone else saying we should see, without trying to see for ourselves, without cultivating our capacity to see, to have that awareness, which is something that evolves as well.
Right.
You have to, you're looking at something, but the more you look at it, the more you really work at looking at something, you're going to see much more. You're going
Mm.
to see much more nuance in there. That's an evolution of your capacity to see. That's
Yeah.
your seeing must evolve and develop. How do we do this? How do we intentionally do something that is important for us, according to this conversation,
Hmm.
that is relevant to a good life? What can we do to facilitate this evolutionary process? Do you have any ideas?
Man, that's so. I want to just insert my experience as an athlete, right? So when we talk about narrative, like most athletes, from the age of 24 or from the age of 4 to 24 years old, I spent 20 years believing that my purpose, my identity, and my value rooted from me being a student athlete, right? I went through a traumatic injury where my femur broke through my hip socket in a game. And of
Mm.
course, that was the moment my narrative shattered.
Mm.
So I entered this space of having to discover and explore elements of the world to fill that void of that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a point during that journey where I realized, like, man, I lacked ownership. 20 years of my life, I lacked ownership of my life. So I came up with this model and I put it in an acronym of like, okay, ownership it goes with three lenses. That's awareness, perspective, and then power. And for power, we could say agency. You know what I mean? So awareness, perspective, and power. So like that is something that I challenge when I go into these spaces in terms of like narrative. Like most people would say you're more than an athlete. And I challenge that communication. I'm like, no, we're not more than an athlete. We'll forever be an athlete. We just have to score in different realms of life.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about agency, like that's my whole model, So to answer your question, like how do we go about that? How do we go about the agency aspect, I think it's just presenting different perspectives. Like this conversation here, you're giving me a different perspective of what you see living well is. I have a certain definition of what living well is, and the third party listening to this can now take those two perspectives and create their own narrative or create their own story. So
Mm-hmm.
I think, I mean, me personally, I would say like conversation is one of the starting pieces.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Taking on different perspectives can enhance our view of the world,
Right,
enhance our view of ourselves, enhance our view in period. If I see the world through your lens and you see the world through my lens, we can't do it 100%, of course, but we can have a sense of that. I'm expanding my way of seeing.
right,
If there is agency has to be involved in, if I'm willing to do so, if
right,
I'm willing to really hear you and take your perspective serious, I don't have to agree. It's not about agreement. It's about saying, oh, that's an interesting way of seeing things. Let me inhabit that for a moment. What works and what doesn't work for me? How do I know what works for me? My life experiences, the
right.
experiences that are presented to me. That's interesting what Jordan said. That might I can include that because this, in order for me to adapt sufficiently or positively to this particular situation, that perspective, that aspect of Jordan's perspective can be helpful to me.
Hmm.
But we have to be open to that. We have to have the desire for that. We have to have that awareness that you're saying. I have to be willing to let go of myself or get out of my own way to be able to take your perspective. If I'm like, nah, it's all about Broderick. I'm a narcissist. My
Right,
view is the best view. It's the only view. Or I'm afraid to take somebody else's perspective
right.
because I can't. Now, there's reasons why we see things that way. And there's some unfortunate reasons why people are afraid to take another perspective because they really want to, I think it's insecure actually, really wanting to safeguard this identity that one has and
Hmm.
not being willing to see that an identity is fluid. There's no stagnant identity. You will see as life goes on, you already probably see just based on what I'm hearing that there is no static identity. There's nothing static about it at all actually. It's constantly shifting and changing whether you want to believe it or not. But if you have the awareness to recognize that and then take the agency, involve your agency in the process of, um, for lack of a better word, controlling that process, controlling your narrative, narrating your narrative. That requires agency. That requires uh, awareness, sensitivity. It
Hmm.
requires being open. When I say being open, that's another way of saying getting out of your own way. Because if we're not willing to do those things, it's going to be really hard to take another person's perspective. Because if
Right.
I'm attached, if I'm fixated on my own identity, my own view, I'm limiting myself actually. I'm imprisoning myself.
Hmm.
Now, I might have legitimate reasons based on a traumatic past. I might have legitimate reasons based on my life history. It doesn't mean even if I have legitimate reason, it doesn't mean that it's healthy.
Right.
I know people who have legitimate reasons for eating shit food all their lives because that's all they know. It's legitimate that they're eating it, but it doesn't mean that it's healthy though.
Hmm.
Um, because we can evolve. We have to recognize our power. And so you mentioned something about power. Agency is associated with this with action, with doing something. And for me, power is this capacity to act. There's this potential to do something. And to recognize that I have a capacity to act is to recognize I have power.
Hmm.
When I recognize I have a capacity to act, I also recognize by doing that, I recognize that I have a capacity to choose, that I have choices.
Hmm.
How am I going to choose? Or how do I know what to choose? That's going to be based on my perspective. It's going to be based on how I see the world. And if I take your perspective You take my perspective. What are we doing? We're enhancing our knowledge because I
Hmm.
know more. I see more. When I read a book, I'm basically taking a perspective. When I go to school to learn something, I'm taking on a perspective of the world based on this thing that I'm learning. So with that knowledge, I began to play this game of these interacting parts, being aware, being sensitive, enhancing my knowledge, looking at taking different perspectives, another way of saying that, and evolving myself. All those things interact with each other. And I'm assuming that you play basketball.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
am assuming that was. Here's the part that's so funny about all this. We do this all the time, especially athletes. It's that's what you do as an athlete. I'm like, now just apply that thing that you do in athletics in your sport to your life. How do you
Right.
get better at basketball? I'm assuming that you looked at people play. I'm assuming that you had a coach. I'm assuming you listened to what people said.
Hmm.
Imagine if you were a 10-year-old, like, no, I don't want to hear what no one else got to say. I'm the 10-year-old Jordan, and the way I play basketball is that's it. That's my identity. The 10-year-old way of playing it. Would you have gotten better? Would you have evolved? Of course not. I just think there's so much wisdom and the process of being an athlete. If we can take what happens as an athlete and apply it to our lives, if you really really think about what did I have to do to get better, what did I have to do to evolve my game, really think about it like you're doing, I think.
Right.
um it
Right.
helps you see how these interlocking parts that you've talked about, how they can enhance our capacity to live a good life.
Yeah. Yeah, man. There is so much value in what you just said. But taking it from the tail end, man, I think the challenge is like the transference. The transference of skills.
Right.
So if our identity keeps us in this one realm, right? It's really all we know, and we're placing all of our eggs in this realm, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for us to now see these same skill sets in the real world.
Yep.
So I think the connecting piece, that's where it's kind of like it goes over your head, and then also too, speaking of like just identity, I'm thinking about like our stories contribute to our identity, and our stories are what keep us safe. So if I've been
Mm-hmm.
living on this story for 20 years and I'm safe, you know what I mean? Like, why would I have any incentive on exploring the other realm? So I think it's important to like break those up, like break the realm up before life does, because the lessons that you don't learn, life will teach it to you.
There it is.
You know what I mean? So,
Oh
um,
yeah.
and I know we're speaking a lot about like curiosity and exploration. I think another key component is exposure. So me coming into the room is essentially exposing perspective to the young folks or to the young athletes. So I say like exposure or curiosity is a prerequisite to exposure.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't expose you if you're not curious, and oftentimes the decision maker is that curiosity piece for the room.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So man, it's very complex. Identity, stories, narratives.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that plays a part into like what is living well. Well, living well is the ability to create a new story tomorrow.
Exactly. And but it's a curiosity. Well, curiosity is essential and foundational, I think, too. But I mean, guess what curiosity is related to? There has to be an agent that's curious.
Right.
Agency always keeps coming up. And recognizing your agency, by recognizing your agency, you recognize your power. They're directly correlated, I think. At least that's what I'm thinking right now in the moment. I mean, I'm
Right.
sure if I go, I get, trust me, I go and sit down and really think about it. I can think my way out of anything. Or I can think with a little bit more complexity, which is important, like what you're saying. It is complex, and to acknowledge that. And what I try to do on this podcast, I want to try to do in my life in general, is to acknowledge that I don't know it all. That
Right.
is so it's the complexity is beyond what this little, just above monkey brain can conceive of in reality. That doesn't mean that I'm going to stop. It's just like, oh wow, that's exciting. I can keep enhancing the complexity by which I see things in the world.
Hmm.
But I have to be willing. It requires curiosity. It requires agency.
Mm-hmm.
It requires recognizing that I have the power to do it, to act in the world. How am I going to act? That's going to be based on what I am aware of. It's going to be based on my education, what I'm
Yeah.
sensitive to, and what is my narrative. For me, narrative is self. Because what is a self? Well, if someone like, who are you? What is your self? What is your identity? It's just a story. You're gonna
Right.
start telling a story.
Right.
And you recognize that, oh, it's just narrative. It's all, for lack of a better word, it's all bullshit. We're making it all up.
Right.
So I don't need to be fixated. And I don't need to be attached to this thing that I made up. Now, when you said something that is safe, this is important. Even though I said that it's BS, even though I said it's made up, it still has value
Hmm.
in a world of human beings interacting with each other in this great narrative, this novel that we're all playing in. We all are these characters with stories interacting with each other. In order to navigate this grand narrative, you need a cohesive sense of self, ego. You need a cohesive sense of identity that's quote unquote safe. That's important. Because especially at a particular point in your life, especially when you're younger, especially you take a person that's coming out of middle school, coming out of adolescence, and they're discovering themselves, they need to find a cohesive, strong sense of self that's safe, quote unquote safe.
Right.
The key is that, yes, have a strong sense of self so that when you're interacting with another person, that you can interact from a strong base. But the issue is when we become fixated and we think that that strong sense of self has to be, or that stable sense of self. Because if you're not stable, you're gonna have a psychotic event. It goes into psychosis.
Right.
Um, and there's lots of people with psychosis going on in the world that are in high places, but we won't go there. Um, if you don't have that strong sense of self, you're gonna fall apart. But there can be multiple truths happening at the same time. And you can use the word complexity. We look at this from a complex perspective. Or you can think of it in terms of a paradox. Yes, strong sense of self, but also know that it's bullshit, that is made up, that is
Hmm.
not real. It's relatively real in terms of the game that we're playing in this novel that we all are playing as a metaphor, or this theater that we're all participating in. It's important to have a stable character, but it's also important to recognize that that character is fluid, that character can be adaptive, that character can evolve, that character has choices, that character has agency to transcend and evolve its narrative. The narrative, the cohesive, stable self can continue to evolve and develop. It doesn't have to get stuck at one place. And what happens with a lot of us, and it's still hard. It's a challenge. I'm
Right.
51. I'm gonna tell you now, brother. Yeah, I talk to a lot of older people. It's still there's gonna be a challenge for the rest of your life.
Right.
But the key is to at least have the awareness that that is what's happening. And once
Hmm.
you have that awareness, you'll be a little bit more okay with overcoming or getting out of your own way and tapping into another sense of self, opening yourself up to a greater possibility of who you are. That's hard. because it's
Yeah.
just it's made it's we're made that way. Because you're right, we have this ego, and this ego is this job is to help us stabilize ourselves. We have
Hmm.
to, that's which is important. And so in order to grow beyond that self, we're going to be fighting against that cohesive force. And that's okay. That's natural. That's why it's hard to evolve sometimes. It's hard to let go of our identity and one identity and move up or enhance our identity. It's really challenging to do that. It's challenging to transcend or adapt or modify our narrative, because there's a force inside of us that says like, no, no, now be careful. You don't want to like destabilize yourself too much, because if you destabilize yourself too much, there's all kinds of vultures out here. There's all kinds of things out here that are coming uh, 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 um, attack you.
Right.
And that's important. There's nothing wrong with that. But you just got to recognize it for what it is. And once you recognize it for what it is, you're like, oh, that's just a part of the game of being a human being.
Hmm.
And I can still overcome those identities and not be so fixated on identity. And knowing that the identity is fluid and it's something that I can play with and use to my advantage to facilitate a good life. If that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Um, yeah, man. Like when it comes to identity too, I think another challenge is like, okay, um, I understand I have agency. I understand I have the ability to evolve, but what direction do I go? And figuring out the direction takes a lot of humility.
Mm-hmm.
So like evolution requires a lot of humility, but also going in a certain direction takes a lot of humility. So I see like a lot of young people, they get stuck on what is it? What is the phrase? Focus on the why, not the how, or the who, not the something along those lines. Of like we focus on like, well, is this the right way, as opposed to just going and exploring and discovering. Because eventually, as you step on the path, like things will start unfolding, and
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I'm recognizing along my journey of like. Sometimes I get stuck at, well, what direction do I need to go, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to just going,
Yep.
and allowing life to unfold in front of you. Because me personally, I have a foundation of God, and I believe that, He's going to direct your path accordingly. Just stay close and stay in alignment. So, back to your point, like I think there's a lot of challenges when it comes to identity. And that's one thing that I've been experiencing of like, okay, what is the direction?
Mm-hmm. But I think you've kind of brought up one of the ways that we can find out what direction to go. What based on what we say, what do you think? What do you think is that? How do you know which direction to go? What would you do to figure out which direction you should take?
Hmm. One model of my life is sometimes I don't know. I just go with what feels right.
Mm-hmm.
So, go with what feels right. And it depends on what source you're connected to. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Mine is
Mm-hmm.
God, and He's not going to push you in a direction that is not meant for you. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, go with what feels right. That's the easiest way.
Mm-hmm. So okay, so I look at that as in tapping into your intuition, feeling into like, okay, I'm drawn in this direction for some reason. Let me go and test it out. What if you go in that direction and you realize like, ooh, probably wasn't the best direction. What do you do then?
Well, that goes to the whole point we've been talking about, evolution and adapting. That's the
Exactly.
journey. That's life. You know what I mean? Like there's going to come a point in time where you bump up against a brick wall, but you have to remind yourself that, okay, I have the ability to go left, go right, or turn around,
Mm-hmm.
or I can climb over.
That's right. Baby, that's it. Exactly. So this evolutionary process is, it's not just like moving straight up and up vertically. No, it's all zigzags, it's all kinds
Right.
of stuff. You go over here, you try this, and you're like, oh boy, that was a mistake. But you
Right.
don't quit. You're like, oh, I learned something. And that's
Mm.
the key. Whatever direction we go, we can learn from it in our own personal experience. We can also learn from the lives of others, having
Mm.
conversation with others, having conversations with people older than us, people who have more life experience. You might disagree with them on all kinds of things. I love talking to my dad about certain things. You know, sometimes when he on this trip, I don't be wanting to talk to him.
Right.
Um, but even my dad in his situation, I probably mentioned this on this podcast. You know, this man literally live in the underworld. You know, alcoholic, all kinds of stuff. You know, we live in different kinds of realities in some respects. We share a reality, of course, but we live in a different reality, of course, in some respects. Yet he's lived more life than I have. Hey, boy, he's seen a lot of suffering, a lot. And so I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm gonna listen, or I'm gonna observe him because I'm gonna learn something from him. I'm like, ooh, even if I learn, like, boy, I'm not doing that. I don't need to go do it myself
Right.
when I see someone else doing it.
Mm-hmm.
That's that perspective taking again. That's a way of looking at the world. That's that importance of acquiring knowledge. It's practical knowledge. Education is it's essential to the good life as well. And applying our agency to educate ourselves, to learn, to facilitate our development and evolution.
Hmm.
And then when we're doing that, whatever life presents us, we have a greater capacity to contend with it. We have a greater capacity to keep moving and adapting. Sometimes we're going to adapt and we adapt and it feels good. And there's sometimes that feel good has some downsides to it. You're like, well, I might not want to do that again because I can see the trajectory of where that can take me.
Right.
Sometimes it feels awful and you probably want to avoid that for the most part. But then sometimes it doesn't feel that good, but you also see like, oh, wow, if I from that experience, that painful experience, there's still something else. And so, for instance, you look at it directionally. Say I go to the right, and that's really painful.
Mm-hmm.
But as I went to the right, I saw something else in that painful experience. And then I went moved vertically, or I went a slightly different angle. And when I went to that moved in that slightly different angle, felt a little bit better,
Hmm.
a little bit more flow. It feels a little bit more aligned. That's the game that we're playing. We're exploring. We're all, I think we're all scientists in that respect, just to
Right.
borrow that term. We're making observations, we're experimenting, we're checking things out, we're collecting data. I mean, we could be scientists. That requires to be a scientist. It requires an agency again. It
Right.
requires agency is where it's happening, and in curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're doing that, we're taking a scientific mindset. I'm not saying scientific method. That's a different thing.
Hmm.
But the scientific mindset of making observations, collecting data, making adaptive changes, formulating a theory, an idea about the situation, which is related to forming an identity, a
Right.
sense of self, who is relating to the world. And you start to adapt that sense of self to contend with whatever life brings you in our
Hmm.
exploration of life. And the direction that we take is going to be informed by the situations that we have in front of us, but also it's going to be informed by our previous education. It's going to be
Hmm.
informed by our outlook. And I think ultimately, I think importantly, it should be informed by our moral outlook, by our moral compass. No matter what your background is, it should be informed about like what direction am I going? What is my ultimate aim in life?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody got an ultimate aim. If someone says that my ultimate aim is no aim, but that's your aim, no aim. I'm just
Exactly.
aimlessly just moving through the world. I'm like, okay, then that's what your interest is.
Right.
That's your ultimate concern, rather.
Right.
For some people, their ultimate concern is being a servant of God, whatever that means. Okay, but what does that mean? A servant
Hmm.
of God. What does that actually mean? Well, for me, a servant of God, I'm just saying
Yeah.
in general, that could mean being a kind person. Okay, then that's my north star. That's my ultimate aim. That's what's driving me. So as I navigate the world, and kindness is what's my driving force, or love, or goodness, or service is my driving force. If those are the things that are my driving force, then I'm going to make adaptations in myself, my sense of self. I'm going to evolve myself to enhance my capacity to be in alignment with that core value, if that makes sense. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be positive. You know, there are people, we see this. There are people who are, their North Star is being a horrible person. I don't know. Stealing the shit. I don't know. If you want to be you can evolve your capacity to steal shit. You can do
Right.
that. You can use this in positive and negative ways. That's why I'm like, well,
Right.
we gotta be careful here, because that
Right.
directionality is going to be rooted in your core values, or your
Yeah.
your 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 ethical foundation, your moral foundation, or your
Mm,
moral outlook on life. And that's
value.
something that to be curious about, as you say.
Yeah, for sure. Values and morals and ethics. Oh man, those are three important three important elements. Um, Man, I think that your values shape, of course, your morals. Um, and I think when it comes to morals, like morals are the gray areas in life. It's easy to do right when right is the only option. It's easy to
Hmm.
do wrong when wrong is the only option. But when it comes to morals, it's like how do you show up in the gray areas of life when you have right or wrong and you need to choose one.
Hmm.
And I think that goes back to the value. Like, what are your values? What do you stand on? And then your morals. Like, how do you stand in it when those things are tested?
Hmm. Oh yeah.
And that's important. That I feel like that is the foundation of when it comes to identity, evolution. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to have those intact before you could know all of the other things.
Hmm. It's how you see the world. If I
Mm,
have a very narrow, limited perspective of the world, which is associated with my identity, my sense of self, if my worldview is so restricted and limited, which is myself is restricted and limited, then in those the gray areas of what is appropriate moral ethical choice in this situation is going to be limited.
right.
So it's like, why would I limit my power? That's a question I always say. Why would I restrict my capacity to be a moral agent in the world?
Hmm.
Why would I constrict my capacity to do good? I mean, seriously, people brag about this shit. That's the weird part. I mean, I ain't reading nothing. I ain't looking at. I don't know. I don't be paying attention to all that stuff. I'm just gonna do me. I'm like, that's weird. Oh, I'm just gonna do good in the community. I don't know. I'm just gonna just do it. Well, you ain't gonna study nothing. You ain't gonna try to learn about the world. You're not gonna. How you can you? Are you willing to try to enhance your capacity to do good in the community?
Hmm.
For me, I'm always gonna be limited. I think you're always gonna be limited because you can't know everything.
Right.
I'm always going to be limited, but I know I'm walking into that situation that I'm limited. It's my duty. Is if I want to contribute, using your words, if I really want to contribute to the best of my abilities, why would I limit my capacity to contribute?
Hmm.
Because I'm fixed, because again, I'm attached to myself. I'm doing it because it's all about me anyway.
Right.
But then when I do that, I limit my capacity. Even if I really, really want to serve, why not? I'm not saying you have to. Some people just not gonna ever do that. Most people don't. In my learning in over life, I've learned the hard way. Why would I not try to educate myself? Why would I not enhance my perspective? Why would I create a sophisticated worldview, an apparatus, an intellectual apparatus to help me? I mean, I would say a sense making apparatus to facilitate my decision making, my how I choose, the direction I go in my contribution to the world. Why would I limit that?
Right.
And I think that's a question. Why would I restrict my capacity to do that?
Hmm.
If you listen to if you take what I'm saying, you don't have to agree with it. But this idea, and you watch the world by looking at that, you will see like, wow, we really do limit our capacity to contribute. Why? Why would I limit my capacity to be kind, to be of love, be to be loving, to be quote unquote God serving, whatever that means? Why would I limit my capacity to do that? And when we ask ourselves that question, that's a question that creates a challenge for us.
Hmm.
And are we willing to evolve? When I asked earlier about what can we do to facilitate our evolution, our development, well, we need to use and apply our agency to challenge ourselves, just like you did in basketball. You only
Right.
played. Did you practice? Practice. All practice is doing is challenging yourself to evolve. Or
Hmm.
do you just go to the game? I'm like, no, I'm going to challenge myself to continue to evolve and develop so that I can play the best damn game I can. And for me, the game is, for instance, and just we'll just use your framework. The game is being aware, being able to apply my agency, evolving my capacity so that I can contribute.
Hmm.
Because my contribution has an impact that extends beyond my own skin, beyond the
Right.
people that I know. It has
Right.
an impact on the whole world beyond social media. The
Mm-hmm.
choices that I make, the lifestyle that I choose to have, has implications on people on the other side of the globe. When
Hmm.
I take that view, in order for me to even have that view, I've had to evolve myself to see it that way. I've had to take many perspectives to see it that way. And my thing is, I will have a greater capacity to contribute, to serve by doing so. And so I asked myself this question, and I ask this of people I work with.
Mm-hmm.
As an educator, this is the kind of stuff I do. I'm like, what is it that is restricting your capacity to serve or to do good or whatever it is that is in line with your core values? That is positive, of course, because your core value don't have to be positive; it can be negative. Um, why would we not do that? And boy, you ask yourself that question. And who is the self that's limiting itself? And what narrative, what story is it telling itself to limit its capacity to evolve, develop, to see, to be curious about contributing in the world?
Hmm.
That is just like going and doing your drills on the basketball for your sport. That's when we having these kinds of conversations. I think personally, I'm talking to you're 29, right?
Right.
I'm talking to a 29-year-old and I'm 51. I could be like, man, I'm the old head, man. I'm gonna tell this young brother. I'm like, no, I'm learning. I might. This is what I do on this podcast. I summarize. I say stuff. I try to, I'm ruminating out loud along with you, using whatever you've said to try to make sense out of it. And in the process, I'm doing that. I'm learning. I learn from a 29-year-old because you have a different life experience than I do.
Hmm.
So that's the game that we're playing, I think, personally, and I think it's in alignment with those things that you mentioned from the very top, contributing. I mean, you said a lot of things, being curious, um, perspective, awareness, evolving. I don't know. I mean, I'm happy, young blood, that you mentioned all those different things because it's. I'm happy to hear that you're thinking in that way. It gives me
Yeah.
hope.
Right. Man, it's all a mindset, man. Mindset is a limitation oftentimes. So it's important to, increase your capacity, as you say. It's all a mindset.
Mm-hmm. Hey, it requires practice, man, and I always, we're always practicing. I always
Right.
say like, what are we practicing? Oh,
We talking about practice? Hey, Allen Iverson,
mm-hmm.
famous
I
quote.
know.
We talking about practice?
But we're always practicing. We're practicing now. We're practicing and playing at the same time. And when we understand that, oh, what am I practicing now? What drills am I? Am I practicing apathy?
Hmm.
Am I, what is it that whatever it is that I'm doing, I am, whatever I'm doing on a regular basis, I am conditioning my nervous system to be a reflection of, which is not just my nervous system, but my psychology, my narrative.
Hmm.
So why not orient our attention to doing something and practicing something that's going to actually enhance my life versus
Right.
practicing something that's going to uh, um, what's the whatever the negative of that? I'm really having a problem coming with
Hinder,
the
hinder.
yeah, hinder exactly. Boy, I'm
Right.
challenged. It's been hard to find the right words today. Hindering my self. Why would I do that? And I think that's the question. What am I doing?
Hmm.
Having that curiosity, as you're saying. What am I doing? Why am I choosing to do the things that I'm doing? What narrative do I hold about myself in the world? Can I change that narrative? What do I need to do to shift that narrative
Hmm.
about myself? What are my core values? How are those core values going to lead me and or guide me in the choices that I make in the world?
Right.
I don't know. Those are my thoughts. I don't know. I'm inspired. I probably, I'm always. I feel like I always talk too much, but
No, that's good. That's good.
I just feel inspired by a lot of the things that you've said, and I'm gonna steal all of it and write a book.
Hey
Contribution,
man.
evolution. I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm gonna come up with an
Right.
acronym.
Well,
Con-
well, I'm happy I can contribute to the platform, man.
you should do it. Like, what did you say? You said contribution. You said
Like evolution,
agent.
sustainability.
Yes. Oh yeah, sustainability. Yeah,
Yep, yep,
I really
yep.
forgot about that one throughout. We're about to end now, but sustainability. Can you just say like in a quick version with sustainability? I know you mentioned a little bit about it, but I got an
Yes.
acronym for you too that you can use to write your book.
Oh, I I need that, man. Man, sustainability. Like, okay, so if you have this definition of living well, how do you now sustain that?
Mm-hmm.
That's just what I think about. How do you stay? How do you consistently stay in this realm
Mm-hmm.
of agency, curiosity, exploration, evolution? You know, all those things. How do you consistently do that now, moving forward?
Mm-hmm. There
Yeah,
it is.
they say there's no above average people. There's average people that do things for an above average amount of time. So that's what I think about when it comes to sustainability.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And I think, based on what I just said, that's being that sustainability is anchored in our core values and
Hmm.
how to, but I think I like the way you posed it. How do I stay sustainable? The key is we have to ask ourselves questions
Right.
consistently. Because if I never ask myself that question that you just posed, well, how would I know?
Hmm.
Like the directionality in which my agency is engaged is based on the questions that I ask, or the
Right.
way the directionality of my attention, which is related to agency, because the agent is intended to move in that direction and to attend in that particular way.
Right.
Well, when I ask myself these questions, that's how. These are like they're not secrets. They're just the obvious way of playing the game. You want to trick yourself to overcome yourself? Keep asking yourself questions. Just keep
That's
doing it. You want to overcome the fixation on yourself, or you think you all high and mighty and all that. Just keep asking yourself questions. You'll see, and and take an honest assessment of yourself.
hmm.
You realize, like, man, I ain't hitting on nothing. That's how we say, man, I ain't hitting on nothing. And and people are like, oh no, you need to have more self confidence. I'm like, I got enough confidence. Trust me, maybe too much. But I also know that I ain't hitting on nothing. Why do I know I ain't hitting on nothing? Because I don't know everything.
Right. Right.
And I'm still learning. I have so much more to evolve as a self.
Hmm. That's
Ultimately, my ultimate quote unquote self, which is dissolved of any, of you can probably put you can't really put any terms or words to it. Sure, that's just spirit. That's just we're all the reflections of the divine. If you're coming from a Christian tradition, we're all in the likeness of God.
hmm.
I know we all are of the image of God. Okay, then, and at our core base, we're of God's nature. So
Hmm.
sure, there is fine. There's but, how many people inhabit and live from that place? Probably nobody. And so if that's the case, then like, well, I ain't hitting on nothing then, because I have
Hmm.
a lot. I have a lot of room to grow. I have so much room to grow. I have so much to learn. I can increase my capacity to contribute. I'm still making hella mistakes.
Mm,
That's just a part of life. You get better at not making as many mistakes, or you get better at overcoming those mistakes and
mm,
working through them. But if you keep evolving, you keep being willing to challenge yourself and grow, you're gonna make mistakes.
right, right. I ain't hitting on nothing.
I ain't hitting on that. I'm telling you, I love, black culture, man. I just the way we speak about things. And I think that's, I know black culture is not monolithic. There are certain things that are in common that a lot of us share.
Hmm.
And black English, I love it.
Black
It,
English.
I love it. There was some linguists say, black English, it's just black culturally speaking English.
Hmm.
It's so great.
Yeah.
Ebonics is happening.
Right.
And when you really like listen to it and the fluidity, it's not about speaking perfect English, whatever that means actually.
Hmm.
um, but this way of speaking, like that's how these little things like I ain't hitting on nothing, or like you ain't hitting on nothing. I mean that means a whole lot. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily you're denigrating yourself or the other person. You're just acknowledging that I don't know everything.
Hmm. Nah, I'm gonna keep that. I'm gonna put that in my toolbox for sure.
Well, don't tell your kids that come in. You ain't hitting on nothing. No, no, no. Don't do that.
Man.
So, man, this has been great, brother.
Definitely.
I always enjoy these conversations in general. I get, as time went along, I felt like I was able to express myself a little bit better. But I love talking to young folks. You're young to me. I'm sure other people are young to you. Um, yeah, I'm just happy that you're willing to come here and share your knowledge. And we all have a certain level of wisdom, no matter where we are in our lives.
Hmm.
And it will continue to grow and evolve. I would love to keep this conversation going in general, but it'd be nice to see in 20 years how you're seeing things.
Right. Right.
But don't rush it.
Yeah, I try
But
not.
yeah, but it's just been great, young man, and keep doing what you're doing to inspire goodness in the world and contribute in the world. Any final words you have for the audience before we sign off?
Man, first I want to say thank you again for allowing me on the platform. I love learning from them brothers that wear the wisdom on their chin. You know what I mean? So I see it. I see you wearing it well. So I appreciate that. But last words, man. My goal that I tell myself, or the story that I tell myself in life is, I want to be the connecting piece between limitation and optionality. So,
Mm.
however I can contribute to any spaces, any places, I'm willing to do. You know what I mean? And I would love to connect with people of your network or anybody listening. So, man, that's what I got, man. That's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.